All right, good people. We are good to go. Just make sure I close this little window so there's no echo. Yeah, so let's just start talking about the most important first thing for everyone to understand about being a full stack developer, which is HTML and CSS. And so just show of hands or thumbs, whatever, react. How many of y'all have heard or have worked with HTML as of right now? Should be a lot of thumbs up here because you know the vibes. We proper preparation prevents poor performance out here. Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the club, man. Welcome to the web dev club. Yeah, we got a front end team right now. Yeah. So yeah, HTML is a very popular programming. Well, it's not necessarily a programming language, but it is an important programming tool for us in the web dev space because, like we talked about, every website that we interact with from the client side typically sends us some HTML as a response. So if you remember in one of the previous sessions, we talked a lot about that client server model and the relationship between a client computer that makes a request to a server, and then the server sends back a response with some data. And we talked about, like, you know, hey, what happens when I go to my browser, I do like google.com and I press enter, right? What happens is that we make a request to the server and Google sends us back their homepage. Well, that homepage is in HTML, right? So everything we see visually on the web has some HTML attached to it, right? So let's take a very simple example here. So let's look at this really beautiful website made by yours truly when I was in college. This is actually one of my first websites I ever built, and it was in a web dev class, much like the one that y'all are in right now. Very simple website, right? Very clean, not too much going on here. But if we take a look behind the scenes, one thing that we can do on any browser that you're in, right? You can go ahead and click view, and on the view developer, should be a tab for developer view. It depends on what browser you're on where this will be, but typically browsers will have something for view developer, and then you should see something for viewing the page source. Another way that you could do this is if you right click on any web page, you'll see something say view page source. So I'm going to go ahead and click that button. And here what you see, right, in very small font is some HTML, right? So HTML is basically text in a document, right? It is a text-based document that has that gets translated into the visual elements that we see on our website. So every website, whether it's my very beautiful first website here, or if we go to the google.com website, right? All of these websites return some HTML in that very same fashion. So if I go to here and I say view page source, I'm going to see the HTML that comes back for the Google website, right? And clearly there's a big difference, right, between what we see coming back. I don't even want to zoom in because that's going to give me an anxiety attack. But clearly there's a big difference between what we see here on Google's side and what we see actually on our on my side, right? The code that I have is a lot cleaner to read. It's very easy to see because it's just pure HTML. On the Google side, a lot of what we're seeing here actually is data coming back in HTML. It's still HTML, but a lot of what's coming back is in the format of JavaScript, which we'll talk a little bit about in the future. But the idea is the JavaScript that's written here is what actually returns to us the Google homepage experience that we're actually used to seeing. And so same idea. We get back some HTML, but the difference can be enormous in terms of what type of HTML you get back based on what site or what site you're looking at or what's going on. So so basically HTML is structured documents. All of the documents are written in a very similar fashion. They have three things that are very similar, or I should say 4 things that are very similar about them. All of the documents in the HTML context start with this declaration that says, hey, this document is an HTML document. And we'll use that declaration so that the browser can render the site appropriately, right? The second thing that's very common in all HTML pages that we'll see as we start building them out is this tag for the HTML that basically defines the actual HTML document. So everything in between line 2 on my browser to line 22 is the actual HTML document. And so the document becomes a very important concept in HTML because we use that document to do things and manipulate things within with JavaScript, with CSS. All of those things are connected. So every HTML has that declaration. Every HTML document has this HTML tag that it uses to define the actual HTML document. The third thing that each HTML document has is a head and a body, right? And so here you can see those clearly that there's other HTML written inside of both of the head and the body, but the head and the body are two important parts of any HTML document. Complete document. The head is where we store information related to metadata, things like, hey, the title of this page, right? So if you see here, the title of this tab says my name, it's because of this title tag here. And then with the body, so the head is all about metadata, right? So things like that name, getting some reference to other files that this HTML document might need, et cetera. And then the body is more responsible for all of the visual elements that we see. And so the most important thing that you need to know about HTML is the fact that it is written in documents. So you can write HTML yourself, right? You can write it in a text editor, like you could use VS Code or any kind of code editor that you're used to. You could write HTML in Microsoft Word or Google Docs and just save it as a particular file. And with that file, you can access it online here as well. And so to demonstrate that point, basically, all HTML files are accessible for us also through our web browser as well. So much like I went and viewed this page source, we can also inspect all of the different elements of a particular HTML page using just our browser and the tools that are built in, the developer tools that are built in. So I told you about right-click, view page source. The other thing that you can do is actually inspect the page. So if you right click and click inspect, what will pop up is this developer tools kind of window. And in that window, you'll see that you get a couple of different tabs. One is for viewing all of the different elements. That's basically showing that same HTML document that you and I just looked at. The second is a console for JavaScript. So you can get back output from the JavaScript console as you're writing your JavaScript. The third is the sources tab, where in the sources tab, you actually can see all of the files that were connected to that particular website that you're using. The network tab we took a look at before, but remember when we first load the page, the network tab makes a bunch of requests. Those requests are categorized here, and each request comes back with some data, right? A response from the server. So that was what I was talking about before. So one of those requests was clearly to this server for this HTML file that we see come back here. So the performance tab is a great tab for when you start actually trying to monitor the efficiency of your website and kind of see how things are working. And the memory is where you can see things related to how much memory is being used on your site and different things. Then there's a couple other ones here that we will talk about in specific context, but right now you don't have to worry too much about. What I want to do is actually pull back up to the sources tab. And in the sources tab, you can see that, like I just showed you, that this index.html file from my personal website is here, right? This is when we actually go to inspect page source. This is what this same HTML pulls up. This index.html file is itself a file, right? There's some file that's getting sent back, or some data is being sent back from this HTML document that is being pulled from the server where I'm hosting my website and being viewed here. If I go ahead and I'm going to click Save As on this, I right clicked on this index and I click Save As, the little dialog box popped up, and I'm going to go to my desktop, not my bank statement situation. go to my desktop, and I'm just gonna go into the code projects folder that I have, and inside of the one for this class, I'm going to go to project. I can go to this one we started, and inside of my intro to HTML, I'm actually going to put the this HTML file here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do cam.html and paste that in there. And what I'm gonna do next is, what I wanna do is go to that particular file and just show you kind of one thing that's real cool about it. So let me stop sharing real quick. And if I reshare, right, I'll share my desktop so y'all can see this. So cool. So we see, if I go to community.github.io, right, this domain, this web app pops up, right? So what's cool about HTML is it's structured in documents. So that very same document that I just saved, if I go ahead into my browser and go to a new tab and I say, okay, cool, I'm on a new tab on Brave, I could go to File, Open File, and in the open file, I can choose that same file that I just put into my desktop in our little code folder. So code projects, sorry, y'all see my very cluttered desktop real quick. Code projects, intro to HTML, and I have that cam.html in there. And as you can see, here's that that HTML file that we just talked about. Here it is again, but now pulled up via my files, right? Clearly there's some things that are way different about it, and we can talk about those things in a second. But the big point I want to make is that HTML are files. Like, we can store HTML in files and actually open them in our browser to view them, just like we're doing here. Just like I showed you before, if you right click and click inspect, you'll see that same inspector pop up with the contents of that particular file registered for you. So here you can see there's that HTML all represented here. So there's a couple things that are different, right? If we go back here, there's a couple things that are different about this particular version of my site and this particular version of my site, right? For one, this one is way more appealing, right? Why? Because my face is on there. But, beyond the fact that my face is on there, well, what's breaking here? Well, clearly there's supposed to be this image, and on this one, that image is actually not showing up. The second thing is, I have this very nice centered text, and the font is way different, right? And that's not actually showing up here on this particular HTML page, right? Well, the things that are breaking here are very important things to note about how HTML actually works, right? The first one is the image, right? Well, what's going on with that image? Well, if we take a look actually at the inspector that popped up for this local file, right? It's supposed to be demonstrating in this here an image, right? This cam headshot.jpg, which isn't actually being referenced because I don't actually have that file connected to this HTML. So I just downloaded the HTML file, but I actually didn't download that image or connect it to that HTML. So that's why that image isn't showing up. But what's going on with that style and that design, right? Well, one of the things that's important to know, and really kind of where HTML's limits are, is that HTML is really about the structure of your web page and the visual structure of your web page, the things that you see show up. So clearly my name shows up, this little blurb shows up, an image is here, but the image isn't connected correctly. The URL is not connected correctly. And then I have these two links. Well, that's the same thing that I have here, right? My name, an image, this one is actually connected the right way, so it's showing up, and then those two links at the bottom that you see there. So technically what's visually here is the same, right? But the way that it's presented stylistically isn't the same, right? And that is exactly where CSS comes in to make our HTML a lot more visually appealing in a stylistic sense, right? So whereas HTML will get you all of the elements you need on the screen, CSS would be what you use to style those elements to get them to look the way that you want them to look, right? Both CSS and the situation with the CSS as well as the situation with the image are kind of similar in that they both require us to link to other media that needs to be attached to this particular site. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the CSS lives in its own place and on my personal site, right? So when I just downloaded the HTML, it didn't actually connect that file. So that's not showing up correctly on the downloaded version because of that. Same thing is true with the image. The image has a particular URL that it's supposed to be looking for, camheadshot.jpg. And because that doesn't exist, that's why we're getting this issue here with this image not showing up. So all this to say, right? HTML is really the fundamental part of the web, right? We get back these HTML documents from any site that we go visit, whether it's Google, New York Times, Twitter, whatever, right? We get back some HTML from these sites. The thing that separates the sites that, look like this from the sites that look like this, or even the sites that look like this, is the actual content within the HTML document that allow for the styling and the dynamicism of these sites to be what they are. So what we're going to talk about is from the very beginning, HTML as it actually how we do it. And then from there, get to the point where we can add our CSS, get to the point where we can add our JavaScript and build upon that. So yeah, that's where we're going. And I hope that y'all are in for the ride with me. So